So our first speaker is quantum dots, trends, and future applications, which we'd all love to hear about, from Jeff Yurek. So once again, his bio is on the website. So I wanted to give him maximum time. Jeff?
All right, thanks for the intro, Dave. It's great to be here. Awesome lineup of speakers today, so honored to be kind of kicking things off with a little introduction to QDs. So I'll start today with introduction to my company and talk a little bit about quantum dots, how they're used in displays, how they bring value to the TV and to the IT market, then cover some of the challenges and opportunities in the display market as well. So start with an introduction to my company. Many of you are probably familiar with Nanosys. We've been developing quantum dots for displays for over a decade, really engaging with the SID community. You may not be familiar with Shoei Chemical. Shoei Chemical acquired Nanosys at the end of 2023. It's a really amazing company, part of this group of companies that were founded in Japan in the 1950s to develop advanced materials for the semiconductor market. Shoei's about a $400 million company today. Their main business is in advanced nanomaterials for multi-layer ceramic capacitors, MLCCs, which are used in everything from AI servers to phones to cars. And it's been a great business for them. They actually started developing quantum dots internally in 2014. And we started our relationship together as a partnership and found that they were awesome at scaling up and developing quantum dots. By 2022, Shoei was making 100% of Nanosys quantum dot materials. That was going so well, they decided to buy us in 2023. And since they've been really investing in developing and expanding the capacity of quantum dot manufacturing. So about a year ago, we launched the world's largest quantum dot foundry in Hiroshima, Japan. Capacity there in terms of quantum dot equivalents is over 40 million TVs today, 40 million square meters roughly. Now we can expand within this facility over 8x that. And maybe you're doing math and kind of going, okay, 8 times 40. That sounds like more area than the whole display industry puts out every year. That's right. It's not a bet that we're going to take over the entire display industry with quantum dots. So that will be really fun. It's really a bet on other applications adjacent to display. Quantum dots are increasingly being used in solar, agriculture, sensors, a variety of other pigments and paints, interesting applications beyond the display market, although display remains the #1 driver today. So quantum dots are great. We can make a lot of them. What do we do with them? How are they deployed in displays? Why are they useful for displays? Well, the way I think about, the most interesting way to think about quantum dots for me, I think, is as semiconductors with a solution processability. Quantum dots are very unique in this way. They're inorganic nanocrystals. They're grown in solution from typical semiconductor materials like cadmium selenide and indium phosphide. They're very efficient energy converters, near unity efficiency. What's very special about them is that we can functionalize them into other materials. By adding an organic or inorganic ligand sphere, they can be added to inks, photoresists, monomers, polymers. They can be attached to biomolecules or cells. So they're incredibly versatile, liquid processable semiconductors. Why is that useful for displays? Well, they have this other unique superpower called quantum confinement. That's where the name quantum dots comes from. And the electrical properties of the quantum dot can be controlled by the size of the QD. You can control the band gap by controlling the size of the quantum dot. So larger quantum dots emit lower energy, longer wavelength photons towards red, and smaller quantum dots emit higher energy, shorter wavelength photons towards blue. This, of course, very useful in RGB displays because we can make a tailored spectrum of light that emits energy in the red and green channels by converting the energy from a blue gallium nitride LED or from a blue OLED or from a UV LED, increasing number of sources. That's why they're useful. They've been deployed in a variety of different components and formats in displays. So in recent years, the first component that we shipped was called QD-OLED. It uses quantum dots coated in a resin layer onto a PET sheet. In 2021, we launched a product we call XQD-OLED. This uses quantum dots extruded in thermoplastic into a diffuser plate component. Very different kind of structure. In 2022, QD-OLED was launched, and this uses inkjet printed quantum dots, red and green quantum dots, inkjet deposited on top of blue-green OLED emitter. And in the future, we'll see here quantum dots in photoresistant inks used in electroluminescent and micro-LED applications as well. And I'll talk about those as we go through. So how have quantum dots been doing in the market? We've shipped quite a few products since our first product launch in 2013, over 1,700 unique products. Actually, the guy who shipped the first one is sitting right over there. Seth O'Sullivan's QD Vision launched the first product with Sony in 2013. It was a really great TV that used quantum dots. Really well reviewed. Seth's my favorite. I think I said this at the QD forum. My favorite thing when I look back on those reviews was a $7,000 65-inch TV. It was widely praised for being an affordable option for TV. So I love to go back to that version of the display industry sometimes. But kicked off the story of quantum dots, right? Delivering performance and value just with a nicer ASP. But TV's been the main driver over time, but we've seen quantum dots designed into monitors, notebooks, tablets, VR displays, signage, kind of you name it. What's been driving that growth in displays? Well, there's really two things we think about. One is improving product market fit. And we see consumers demanding more from their displays, and quantum dots are able to deliver more performance. We don't really control that piece of it, though. What we do control is the quantum dots themselves. One thing that we think a lot about is making the quantum dots work harder. The more environmentally stable we're able to make them, the more stable under high flux, the more efficient, the more value we're able to unlock, the more markets we're able to unlock, the more places we're able to deploy them. And to give you an example, looking back on our first component, the first version of QDEP, we need a very strong barrier layer to protect the quantum dots. 10 to the -4 water vapor transmission rate, WVTR, almost glass-like barrier on a piece of plastic. And these are very expensive, $300 per square meter, and actually a little more than that in 2013. So, you know, that's like the ASP of a TV today, right? So that wasn't going to fly if you were going to scale that in volume. So today, we have 10 to the -1 barrier property, or even no barrier. So those extruded components I talked about are now approaching $10 per square meter. So that's really enabled rapid growth for quantum dots in the display market. So at the end of last year, we've seen over 100 million displays shipped with quantum dots inside. You can see the trend is accelerating as we're able to drive those costs down and bring up the capability. So the story for quantum dots is really just getting started. So as I said, TV's been the main driver. So I want to dive in here and talk a little bit more about the product market fit for TV, kind of what's going on in the TV market, and touch a little bit on IT as well. Before I get into more detail on the TV, I think it's fun to look backwards as well and kind of get a sense of where we're going. I posted this on LinkedIn last night. Actually, usually when I do a talk like this, I like to find something that helps me focus on procrastinating on actually making my real slides. And so I did a massive research project on 100 years of TV history. And that was a very, very effective way to procrastinate on my slides. But what I found was pretty interesting, and I thought it would be useful to share here. So looking back over the decades, looking at area and millions of square meters here, going back really to 1928, and then looking forward a little bit to 2030. And you can see, you know, of course, CRT had a great 85-year run there. But since then, LCD has just had an astonishing run of growth, especially on an area basis. Since it launched in the market, shipped enough area to cover Luxembourg. It ships every year the amount of area that CRT did at its best ever decade. So really just astonishing growth, and really has run away with the market for large panel displays. And we're only looking at TV here. Although TV is sort of 70% of the market, so I think you could add the other markets. The chart really wouldn't change all that. So, you know, why is a quantum dot guy showing me this historical chart? Well, a couple of things I think animate this talk a little bit. You know, one of them is how we think about the products that we make. And we think, of course, LCD has a lot of value left to offer. If you can make technologies and components that deliver, you know, value, performance, and can scale with low cost, there's a great opportunity in LCD, and there will be for some time to come. And the second thing to think about is like what comes next. what comes after LCD. Does anything ever displace LCD as the sort of king of large panel TVs and displays? I don't know if any of these technologies on the chart here are really positioned to do that. I think in some ways the bar is going up faster than they can add capacity to catch up, right? So what would it take to really threaten LCD? One answer might be it's an innovator's dilemma situation where it's sort of like these quarter-inch light engines that are in AR displays, and it's a virtual area that this just gets erased completely and we never have it again. Or you have something that can really scale and deliver performance. And we, of course, think QD-OLED might be part of the answer there, but we'll catch up on that at the end. For now, there's a lot of TVs to make and a lot of quantum dots to sell into the TV market. So what do consumers want in TVs? I think it's important to start sort of from first principles there and understand what the market's really asking for. So if you ask consumers what they're looking for, the one thing they want is size. They want really big TVs. I think that's fairly self-evident. Number two is price. They want a big TV. They don't want to pay a lot for it. I think these are really like one and the same thing, 1 and 1A, really. They just buy the biggest TV they can possibly afford. Is the right way to think about that, I would say. Number three, this is what I care about, is picture quality, right? So consumers do rank picture quality highly. It's not as important as cost or size. Do they say dynamic range, color gamut, and motion clarity? Absolutely not, right? They say a variety of things when you ask them. They don't say any of those things, really. But I think they kind of know it when they see it, kind of thing. These are my metrics for what I think are the most important metrics for TV. I'll call them the TV3. I'm inspired by my friend Ajit Nainan from Meta. He has this 9x9 for AR/VR displays. Unfortunately, flat panel TVs are not as complicated. You could throw out resolution. These are all 4K TVs. And you could argue about viewing angle, but I don't think it moved the needle. And it didn't give me the alliteration for TV3, so I picked it out. So we'll kind of look closer at each of these features that consumers care about. So when we say bigger and cheaper, what do we mean? How big, how cheap? CNET did a great poll asking consumers how big of TV they would buy if money was no object, and then how much they would spend on it. No surprise here. Most consumers want a TV 75 inches or larger, right? How much do you want to pay for that? Most want to spend under 500. If you go up to 1,000, now you're capturing over roughly 75% of the market, right? So, it really drives the point home. Consumers want big cheap TVs. And quantum dots deliver on that today. This is a picture one of my colleagues took at Costco during the holiday season. Here's a 98-inch quantum dot LCD for $15.50. It's so big, there's no scale there. It could be a 43-inch TV, but it's on a pallet. It's really a 98-inch TV. And so really testing that thesis, making these as low price as we can. And the lower you go and the bigger you go, the more consumers buy it. Omdia is forecasting over 1 million units from the size class this year. So not really significant from a unit volume perspective, but that starts to become very interesting from an area basis. And so where do we go from there? Do we sort of stop at 100-inch? A lot of analysts are, I remember talking to some analysts who were measuring the size of a Ford F-150 truck bed to see would that be the limitation? Would elevator sizes be the limitation? No, there doesn't seem to be any limitation. The bigger you go, the more they do it. And one way to think about this is if a bigger TV can be made, it will be made. Sort of like the quote about, why do you climb Mount Everest, right? It's because it's there. And so looking here at this chart from Omdia about TV fab gen sizes, you can see the 116-inch TVs are being made at Gen 8.6 with really great yield, but you're using MMG and that slows you down a little. And what are you really doing with all those 32s that you're taking off, right? So what if you did it at 10.5? Well, you could do 2-ups at 115s, but not great yield. So what if you did 2-up 130, right? That's much better yield. I was pretty astonished by that. I actually asked our supply chain. I thought, well, we're going to be the bottleneck because we can't support 130 TVs. No, sure enough, we can. Actually, the supply chain's ready for it. They thought the polarizer films might be more bottleneck than the QD films, but I would not bet against that happening. Sure it will. If you can make it in the fab, it'll happen. So look for 130s sometime soon. So now getting into some of the picture quality aspects I talked about. The first one here is high brightness HDR. I think consumers love really, really bright TVs. We were just talking about that before the conference started here. I realize I'm in Los Angeles. We're not that far from Hollywood. So please note that I'm saying consumers like bright TVs. I'm not saying Hollywood directors like bright TVs. Keep that in mind for the Q&A session. We do too. We also love black levels. We don't control the denominator in the contrast equation, right? That's a function of the mini LED backlight or the OLED substrate that we're built on top of. What we do control is the numerator, and we can enable much brighter TVs. There's two ways we do that. One is, of course, with more efficient quantum dots for better at converting light. And the other way is by making more reliable, again, making those quantum dots work harder. And so now we see quantum dots in TVs that are 2, 3, 4,000, even briefly 10,000 nits, according to SID-LA. So we don't usually show reliability data, but I thought it would be useful to share in this context. And so we're looking here at a sample that was put under test, I think, sometime in 2020, 47,000 hour lifetime for this sample of QDEF, and it's at 2.5x accelerated flux condition, also accelerated thermal condition. Just now squeaking up onto T90. So if you put this at 1x, it would be well above 100,000 hour lifetime for an HDR TV. And we're seeing brands start to actually advertise this. I never thought I would see this day in some ways, but here TCL's talking about 100,000 hour lifetime for a 3,500 nit peak, 950 nit full screen sustained TV. So they really believe in the capability of quantum dots to deliver high luminance under stress. And QD-OLED is not to be left behind. The OLED guys are now pushing much brighter as well. I thought this was actually pretty amazing from Samsung Display. Now hitting 4,000 nits on an OLED. So there's your really great contrast ratio. More impressive to me is the full screen luminance hitting 440 nits. I think that's a real breakthrough in terms of the efficiency of the system. Now they're doing that by adding a 5th layer to the OLED stack. But quantum dots are part of the story here. Again, you have to be very efficient, and you have to be able to have the lifetime to survive under that very, very high flux. And again, a very different structure. This is an inkjet printed quantum dot that's printed in air. So it's a very, very different structure and type of device. Next thing that I talked about was wide color gamut, and quantum dots are able to deliver, of course, really wide color gamuts. One of the things we're hearing from brands right now in the TV space is they're looking for over 90% VP 2020 as a next benchmark that they want to see TVs get to. I think they feel P3 is pretty broadly found across the board. Everyone's sort of over 90-95% P3. And they're motivated to just go to the next thing. And so they're looking at 90% PT 2020 and asking us if we can get there. And we can. And this comes back to the unique tuning capabilities of quantum dots. 90% PT 2020 is challenging for any technology. You need really narrow full width half max, and you need precise peak wavelength control. And so we're showing here cadmium-free quantum dots. And see on the x-axis is the green peak wavelength. And the red peak wavelength is plotted in the lines. And this is for a certain wide color gamut color filter that's pretty common. And so you can see there's a range of solutions here that's actually pretty narrow, somewhere between 525 and 532 on the green, and then over 640 on the red. But our recommendation in this case would be the 531 green and the 640 red as the best combination of gamut coverage and efficiency. But the brands can choose. And this is another place where Shoei has really brought some extra capability to the table. So all these wavelengths are available in MP today from Shoei. Nanosys, we could always tune the wavelength, but it wasn't always like ready in MP like this. So this is sort of a new level of capability for us. And the last one is motion clarity that I mentioned. And motion clarity is quite complex and can be characterized in a variety of ways. If you think about it, again, from sort of the brand perspective, they talk a lot about refresh rate. That's sort of a key marketing message for them is high refresh rate, fast displays. Gamers really, really care about this metric. And you might be thinking, well, you're in the backlight of an LCD. Why are you talking about this? LCDs are slow, and you can't sort of help, right? And that is correct, actually. But quantum dots are super fast. We have under 100 nanosecond response time. That's sort of like over 1 million hertz, if you want to think of it that way, sort of unlimited response rate. But again, the LCD shutter is the limitation. But when you look at LCDs with full array local dimming or mini LED backlights, it can become an issue. So if you use something like a KSF phosphor, potassium fluorosilicate, it's a bright red phosphor from GE, it has a slower response rate, maybe 8.5 millisecond response rate. This effectively limits you to around 31 hertz if you want to avoid seeing artifacts. What do I mean by artifacts? Well, you see it in the test pattern here on the left side of the slide. This is what we call cyan flash. So this is a white bar that's sweeping back and forth. As the bar enters a new zone, the LEDs in the backlight turn on, right? The shutters open, the LEDs turn on. It's a blue gallium nitride LED, turns on instantly. The green beta cyanide phosphor turns on in a few microseconds, and then the red starts to warm up, right? And so what you have is blue plus green, and you get this very bright cyan color instead of light. Flip side of this is you can sometimes see red ghosting as the frames close it as well. So this is running at 120 hertz in this image. And you can check this out on your own display at this link. Blurbusters made that test pattern available for free if you want to check out your own display. So that's a little bit about the technology and the factors that consumers care about. So I thought it would be useful to put it all together in one really, really massive eye chart for you guys to squint at here. So kind of walk through this. There's a few technologies that are deployed with quantum dots in display today in TVs. First is QD, what we call QD-LCD. These again use those extruded XQDF components. Next we have QD mini LED, and these all really use the QDF component, that film component. And then you have QD-OLED, which uses inkjet printed quantum dots on OLED. These compete with white OLED at the high end of the market and KSF LCD at sort of more the entry level end of the market. It really is a crazy eye chart, so I'll put sort of a heat map here to help make a little more sense of it. And we use pricing data here from Best Buy, and the metrology is from Rate. I'm ranking these here from green, best in class, to red, what I would consider below the premium experience. And you can see that quantum dots have something to offer for a wide range of consumers. You want the best possible image quality, we've got you with a QD-OLED. You want the biggest TV on the market with amazing brightness and good image quality, QD mini LED is there for you. And you just want a really big TV with image quality you can still be really happy with, QD LCD's got that. The other thing that stands out to me in this analysis is that QD mini LED is the only line that's all some shade of green. And I think this like barely represents QD mini LED's sweet spot that it occupies in the market, right? The great mix of features that consumers care about, the biggest TVs, the brightest TVs, really reasonable price point. And that's why it's been performing so well. Again, we think quantum dots have great solutions across the board. So you don't have to take my word for it. This is ratings.com. Every season, they update their list of the best TVs in the market. Their winter 2025 list. Most of the TVs on the list are quantum dot enabled TVs. So their best overall TV and their best home theater TVs, those are both QD OLEDs. Their best bright room is a cadmium-free QD from Sony. And there's a number of notable mentions, including Samsung and Hisense LCD as well. So if you're in the market for a TV, I highly recommend Ratings. It's really rigorous. Everybody in this room would enjoy their kind of process. Just an insane amount of metrology that they throw at every TV. And then they update it constantly as well as they improve it. So that's TV. How about IT? IT is another big growth area for us. In fact, it's the fastest growing segment for quantum dots in display today. We've seen over 3x unit growth going from 23 to 24. And this chart here, sorry, that's kind of a Bezos chart with no y-axis, but it combines monitor and notebook displays. On the monitor side, we see a mix of QD OLED and QD mini LED. QD OLED is doing really quite well there. We see tons and tons of products. And the notebook side, we have QD mini LED, and we see a lot of traction there. A lot of interest in tandem OLED panels and in OLED panels in general in notebooks. But we see that the brands really going for QD mini LED. It's a lower cost and offers a great solution, just like all the qualities I mentioned. There's one image quality thing I would highlight on IT, and while we're talking about it, it goes back to the color tuning. This is another thing that brands are asking us for. On the TV side, they want 90% of BT 2020. On the IT side, we're hearing a lot of interest in 100% Adobe RGB in XY and 100% PCI P3 in U prime V prime from the same display. So that's quite challenging to do. You have two wide color gamuts, one with a deep red, one with a deep green. You have two different chromaticity standards to deal with. And so you really do need that fine peak wavelength control that we're able to deliver. And so you see some solutions here plotted using different, again, cadmium-free quantum dots with the same color filter. So another place where that tunability really is coming in handy. So quantum dots are doing quite well on display. We've got some great solutions in the market. Everything is just all rosy, right? Well, there's always some challenges. So I thought I'd walk you through a couple of the challenges that we're facing and thinking about today. The first one I'll bring up is the RoHS regulations in Europe. RoHS is the restriction on hazardous substances. And you may know that some quantum dots use cadmium. That's a controlled substance for RoHS in the EU. In fact, a third of quantum dot displays today use some amount of cadmium. And as of November of 2025, of this year, that exemption will go away. The EU has been thinking about this for a long time. They're finally doing it, and the exemption for cadmium is going to go away. Well, that's a third of the market. What does that mean for quantum dot displays? Is it a big problem? Well, sort of an anticlimactic one, actually, because all displays in the market today are using below 100 ppm cadmium. So they don't require the exemption. All the brands have already switched to this. Most are using 0 cadmium, and then some are using below 100 ppm. So that's good to see. And the performance gap between cadmium-free and cadmium is closing. You know about quantum dots, you may know cadmium selenide is sort of the original quantum dot material. It's been worked on a lot more. It has always had an edge in terms of efficiency, in terms of power efficiency. That's why the EU allowed the exemption in the first place. And we want to have more efficient displays in the EU, and we're willing to make this trade-off to have some cadmium if we can have more efficient displays. Well, we did some analysis of the market. We looked at the top 16 TVs, 8 with cadmium and 8 without. And what we found actually really surprised us. We found the cadmium-free sets in the market actually outperformed the cadmium sets on a nits per watt basis, on average by 15% better. We shared this with the EU, and I think this factored into their thinking for, if you're not getting what you're paying for with this exemption, so let's kind of move on from it. That surprised me, but it's really all about optimization, right? So for TV set brands that are willing to optimize their TV a little bit, they can get plenty of performance out of the cadmium set. And you can see that the average color gamut is quite close, although cadmium selenide is a small edge. This is one of the reasons Nanosys is, again, very focused on developing cadmium-free going forward. Another potential threat on the horizon for quantum dots is RGB mini LED. Many of you went to CES, probably saw one of these demos. Just about every TV brand had one of these. RGB mini LED is kind of an interesting name. What does that really mean? Well, TV sets are using discrete red, green, and blue LEDs in the backlight. Going back to the original LED LCD idea, the Sony, I think, Qualia in 2006. Right? Now, that set didn't modulate the luminance of the 3 colors. That's sort of the new trick that the brands are adding here. So what they're able to do is change the color of the backlight. It's very different. We're used to seeing kind of grayscale modulation of the backlight, but now you can modify the color. There's a great kind of, this is actually a mock cutaway, not a real cutaway, so it's just kind of a representation of what's going on. But you see the left side of the screen here is the front of screen, and then the right side is what's going on in the backlight. You can see actually the color from the front of screen is captured in the backlight. See the red car, actually, you're just turning off the red in the backlight. And that makes sense. You think about that, right? If I only need red and I only have to make red, that can be a significant power saving, right? It can also improve the color gamut. But there's some quirks there from a metrology standpoint, so I'll talk about that on the next slide. And the other thing here is it's quite expensive, at least for now. Still have more complex power supplies, more binning issues. One brand told us it's over twice the price for QD-OLED. So I don't think it's a near-term threat, but it's sure something I'm keeping my eye on. So I mentioned there's like sort of color quirk to display, and I'll try to walk you through this. I think this is a trend that we see broadly in displays. Displays are becoming more complex, more capable, and really pushing into some new territory that is very different to think about. In some ways becoming these complicated black boxes, right? You send a signal in, a bunch of crazy math and stuff happens, and you get a result at the front of the screen. Not as simple as it used to be. So what's going on here? So this is an RGB mini LED. We actually gathered data from some of the sets at CES. So this is based on measured data for the backlight, not for the color filter. We're making an assumption about a wide color gamut filter here. And let's say we want to measure the blue. So you want to measure the blue chromaticity. You send a blue test pattern. And stay with me on this, but we're going to just measure one single pixel. And I realize that's not how it really works, but that'll make sense on the next slide. So we're measuring our blue pixel. We have our signal up. What happens in the set? Amazing. The backlight turns on. It's only blue, right? You run that through the blue filter, and you get really pure blue at the front of the screen. In fact, if you look at the chromaticity chart on the right side of the slide here, it's really deep. It amounts to 93% of VT 2020. So quite deep color coverage. Pretty amazing performance, actually. However, things get really interesting if, let's say, in our test patch, the other side of our test patch happens to have some green in it, right? And this is, let's say, is one zone of the mini LED background. Now we go back to our single pixel, and underneath that pixel, the backlight now has to have green energy to support the green pixels on the other side of the test patch. So you now have a cyan backlight. Now you're running your cyan backlight through your blue filter, right? And you end up with some color crosstalk, some bleed through the blue pixel on the right-hand side. If you look at the chromaticity chart, that really moves the chromaticity of the blue point quite significantly, right? It actually turns out that the green emitter they're using is a relatively broad emitter, and it's a relatively short wavelength. So it's really dumping a lot of green energy through that blue filter. So this knocks you down from 93 to 80% of VT. This is really weird to think about. But as you're watching content on this display, the blue point is moving back and forth along this line between these 2 points. The more white the scene is, the more RG and B are in this any given zone, the closer it is to the shorter point, and the more pure it is, the closer it is to the deep. So how does that look with QDEF? Well, we don't have to go through two cases. QDEF, we can't modulate the RGB, which is kind of a negative also, but we have that color tuning capability. So, and we have very narrow forward pattern. So we're able to move that green point a little bit out of the color filter bleed and keep it very narrow. So not as deep as the pure RGB, but still 88% of VT 2020 in this case. And it doesn't move around. So we think QDEF delivers more color performance more of the time in these types of sets. And you can see the sort of chart here of making that comparison. But again, very interesting idea in RGB mini LED. It'd be very interesting to track and sort of see how it does in the market. And just again, also interesting to think about in terms of the complex black box that these devices are becoming. So QDs are doing well on display. Certainly some challenges on the horizon, but we think we've got good answers there. What's next for quantum dot display? Well, remember at the beginning of the talk I mentioned we think a lot about making quantum dots work harder. And this is an application I'm really excited about and a great example of that. The harder we're able to make the quantum dots work, the more we can open new markets. And we've just got our first design win in the automotive space with a major car brand. This is a really big breakthrough for us. Working with a couple of our film coating partners, actually, we developed a new system with new cadmium-free quantum dots that's able to pass the reliability tests for automotive. This is a big deal for quantum dots. I can remember, like laughing automotive guys out of our SID booth many times, right? They come in and say, gee, this looks great, why don't I put this in my car? And I'm going, yeah, let's go, right? Then the next question is like, so how does it perform at 105 C? And you're just like, what? Hey, like we're barely designed into a tablet, okay? Like kind of come back in 10 years, right? And like it is 10 years later and we have an answer. So we're looking at 120 milliwatts per square centimeter here and 20x the typical flux in this application, 1% luminance loss after 1,000 hours. And really passing the thermal test too. This is some of the really hard things, right? 90 degrees C, 95 degrees C, 105 degrees C. But this is really accelerated thermal testing. Like definitely, if you think your car is 105C, don't get in it, right? But quantum dots are passing both the luminance here and the white point shift over time. So a really big breakthrough for us. And I think like everybody in this room, we're all very excited about the automotive market, right? Growing market. I think Ross will verify later. What could be number 3 on area pretty soon, maybe, right? So really growing fast. More displays, bigger displays in cars, great. You know, why do quantum dots matter though? Like who cares, right? And I think the way you think about the way brands think about it, one feedback that we get is that they see these better displays in cars as a way to sell subscriptions. That's really their motivation, right? They want to wow you in the showroom with a great display. You go, wow, this big screen in my car, how cool, right? But then they want to make sure it still looks great when you're driving it around because they want you addicted to watching content on it. So you pay them for the connectivity package that you would otherwise have no reason to pay for, right? So they really care about having really great display quality. And there's a big gap there in terms of color performance versus what people have in their homes today. We've been measuring every car that comes through the Nanosys parking lot, and we see now 80% NTSC on average for recent cars in the market. Yes, car brands do use NTSC, and sorry, I'm not sorry about that. We're not going to educate them to change that because quantum dots score very high on NTSC. But the brands are asking us for 105% NTSC and even larger color gain. And why are they going so crazy, right? Well, it has to do with sunlight readability. And 10,000 lux is a common ambient lighting condition in the car. So we actually took a TV out in our parking lot and shined reflectors on it and did our own measurement to verify this. That's what you see on the chart on the left. It's a 95% P3 in a dark room set. And under 10,000 lux, we saw 22% P3, 20%. So that's a major loss in color saturation. And so that's one of the reasons the brands want a little extra headroom and sort of color horsepower. Hopefully they're color managing it well. I don't have anything to say about that, but hopefully they are, and you're having a good experience under a wide variety of light conditions. That's where quantum dots really add value. So how about some of those future applications I mentioned already? We've been designed into LCDs for quite some time now. QD-OLED's going strong. How about QD micro LED and QD electroluminescent? I'll kind of wrap up the talk with a look at these. Start with a look at some of the work that Applied Materials has been doing on ultraviolet micro LED. They've been developing this solution using Nanosys cadmium-free materials for some time. Maybe you've read some of the papers. There's an ID Mag paper link here. This is a really, really cool, I think really clever. The more you sort of pull the onion layers back on this design, it's really, really clever and well thought through. They're doing something very unique with 4 subpixels per pixel. I usually only need RGB. But for each pixel, they're putting down 4 ultraviolet micro LEDs. And then they're printing on top red, green, and blue quantum dots to come up with an RGB solution. This helps them improve the yield of the micro LED manufacturing so that they don't have to repair. It's actually worthwhile to put down that extra pixel. Repair slows you down if you have to do it. When you do the repair, you can damage adjacent pixels anyway, right? So you really don't want to go there. And so it's a really, really clever solution. And having red, green, and blue quantum dots enables them to come up with an arbitrary RGB solution at every pixel. The other interesting thing is they're using 385 nanometer ultraviolet emitter. And this is also very beneficial for the quantum dots. Green cadmium-free quantum dots are actually not great blue absorbers, not in the context of a single pass color conversion application. So it's a big challenge, for example, in the QD-OLED. You need a relatively thick layer of quantum dots for the QD-OLED, and you need some additional color filtration. And we think this is probably part of the reason you see a green OLED if they're still in, right? Not so here. Like shortening up the pump wavelength to 385, the green cadmium-free quantum dots are very happy. They can absorb all that UV light in a very, very thin layer, very, very efficiently. So it's a really, really clever way to optimize the performance of the quantum dot, make them even more efficient. And you don't need as much color filtration. So you don't need pattern RGB filtration on top. You can have a single UV filter that encapsulates the whole display in one layer. Much simpler manufacturing. This is another clever idea. And the last thing I'll point out here, I think is just kind of a fun detail, is you're using a UV cured ink. You're printing it on top of a UV emitter, so you just turn the display on and cure the thing from the inside out. Just like really cool little clever idea. Here's a look at the performance of the cadmium-free quantum dots. It's a different blue. It's a zinc selenide blue compared with typical red and green quantum dots. And you can see really great color coverage here at E3. And it's marching its way towards commercialization. We did the first public demo at CES 2025. I think that was the first time it was really shown publicly. And we did that with CTC. It's a division of Foxconn. They've got the tooling from Applied Materials, and they're bringing up a prototype line now. You can see some really good specs here in terms of the display performance. Got some great coverage on YouTube there from the FOMO. Most importantly, the materials are passing the reliability tests needed for these applications. So AMAT's done RG and BQD at 5x UV exposure and thousands of hours of lifetime. So really think it's ready to enter. So wrap up here with the last thing, which is quantum dot electroluminescence. This technology goes by a wide variety of names. We're using QD-EL. Maybe you've heard QLED, maybe you've heard AM-QLED, maybe you've heard Nano-LED. One of the things about this I'll be really fascinated to see is what the brands call it when it launches. One thing I've learned is I do not have a vote what it's called. I remember getting lots of like hate email when Samsung launched the QLED LCDs. I'm like, look, man, it's not me. I didn't make that call, but okay. So we think this is the future solution process emitter for displays. Why do we think that? Well, it's an electroluminescent device. You can think of a lot like an OLED. So instead of converting photons into photons, we're converting electrons, holes into photons. Very similar kind of device structure to an OLED. With a few differences, different energy levels, things like that. Need some optimization in the stack. It's an emissive display, so it has perfect black levels like you'd expect. It has really perfect color and viewing angle. You have the tunability of the quantum dots, of course. You also don't need microcavities in the same way you want OLED. You don't have off-axis viewing angle shift. And we see higher system efficiency with lower turn-on voltage, right? And this really matters in the overall system efficiency. You can think sort of tandem OLED performance, but with a single wafer, much more optimal. And you have rugged inorganic materials that have higher potential, not realized today, but potential for peak luminance and improved reliability. You can see in the literature things like 600,000 nit electroluminescent quantum dot devices have been made, right? And I don't think you can say that for OLED, right? So you can see there's a very high ceiling. We haven't really run into any major roadblocks yet in getting there. Last and most importantly, I would say, is it's a low-cost solution process manufacturing, right? And this is what makes us really bullish. No vacuum tooling needed. Maybe you can use LCD equipment to make these panels as sharp as already done. So that's what makes us really exciting. Again, continuing the march towards commercialization. We showed efficiencies are really improving. We showed here a blue cadmium-free over 20% at SID last year. The lifetimes are getting there. Red and green are very close to a commercial ready, I would say. But of course, blue is lagging behind. So familiar story for those of us in display. I think Brian Berkeley kind of pulled me aside a few years ago. But you might want to stop tracking OLED because you're going to be in their shoes one day. And it's like, yeah, here I am on stage being like, look, our blues. Don't worry, it's coming. So I feel that feedback. One way to think about that march towards commercialization is the steady progress you've seen in public demos. So showing here on the left, Sharp Display Tech showed a 12-inch electroluminescent QD-EL at CES 2024. This looked really great. SDC followed up at SID 2024 with a brighter 250 nit CAD-free inkjet printed version. And then TCL at CES 2025 showed a 400 nit inkjet printed CAD selenide quantum dot electroluminescence. So this is where I'll put my SID marketing chair hat on and say, what will we see at Display Week 2025? You have to come and find out. I think we will see some really cool demos of QD-EL. Certainly some really interesting papers in the pipeline. So if you're going to be in the Bay Area, please come to Display Week and check out the latest QD-EL demo. And I'll sort of end here with this question that goes back to my big TV chart. we think this technology has potential to be the technology that finally unseats LCD. I'm a believer that emissive will win in the long run, some flavor of emissive, and I think quantum dot electroluminescent could be the answer. You get sort of $100 per square meter price point with solution process manufacturing. And the key is lower capex so that you can actually catch up to LCD as LCD area. So just wrap up here, some of the points from the talk. Quantum dots continue to deliver value in display, of course, in QD, LCD, and OLED. We see increasing market momentum, expanding applications in automotive, over 100 million shipped and growing. And next generation QD technologies are really on the horizon, coming like QD. So the story is, again, just getting started. So I'll take any questions. Thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, question, good enough to introduce yourself.
Yeah. 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 Oh, sure. Yes. So Joe's asking about near infrared, and you mentioned somebody at CES talking about near infrared display, putting near infrared emitters into displays as a potential health benefit. We do see that. In fact, I can tell you that's already shipping in China, 650 nanometer wavelength red. So yeah, we're already on that. It's very exciting. I would like to see more research to sort of validate that that works. But you want to put those PDs in, we'll tell them to you. Absolutely. It would. We're seeing a mix of ideas. Because one challenge is if you go out to 650, now you're moving away from the photopic curve of the eye, right? So you're losing nits, even if you have the same number of photons, and that's challenging for any TV brand. So I think we're seeing a mix, but I think in one case that becomes a red primer, which is like really outrageous. But I wouldn't recommend that. I would probably do a mix. Got to have something like 630 in there to get your efficiency up. Thanks, Matt. Stand up. Larry? Yeah, sure. So will micro LEDs be a feasible technology for TV? Go back to that my history chart there, and looking forward, you really don't see it on that chart, even go through 2030. I think what did I read from an analyst recently? Maybe it was Bob O'Brien. You could get to, if you follow the cost down trend today, you could get to sort of $10,000 75-inch TVs by the middle of the next decade. So I think the cost down trend there is going to be very challenging for micro LED to catch up in TVs. It's certainly part of the market. It will become significant in terms of dollars and maybe even a little bit on area, just because they're 3-meter area displays and you sort of get a couple of them. But yeah, good. Right. So quantum dots could put how would you solve the pick and place problem? And that's what you see with the small displays from Applied Materials, right? We're just printing onto the micro LEDs, putting 4 down, and you could do something like that in a TV. So far, we haven't seen it. Yeah. Modular. Yeah. Good. Good to see you. Good to meet you. Yeah. Okay, so where do quantum dots fit in reflective displays? Do we see automotive brands using reflective displays? I would say we've explored that reflective display thing off and on over the years. We've had engagements with different companies. Certainly could use quantum dots as like a light source that's tuned to, kind of activate and help you when the lights dim outside or something like that. But we haven't seen much traction there, and not aware of it in automotive, but it's a good idea. We could definitely see that. As long as you have something for the dark side when you go through a tunnel or something, fire a bullet light source. Yeah. Right. Really good question. So what do we think about, okay, yeah, what do we think about the color conversion layer for AR? And you maybe noticed I didn't really talk about that. I stayed focused on TV. So you want 10,000 nits, you want 20,000 nits, let's go, right? We're here for you. You want 1 million nits, you want 7 million nits or whatever it is, we're not there. We're not there, we're not close. And this goes back to, the sort of innovator's dilemma question that I mentioned. We're very area driven, right? So, talk to some AR brands and they're like, hey, look, this is a $3 or $4 million, 3 or 4 million units of product. Wow, great, right? For us, it's like 100 square meters. Right? We're square kilometer driven, not square meter driven, right? And so it's very interesting and something I'm thinking a lot about. Do I think we could get there? Yes, I think it's maybe possible, but it's a lot more development work and sort of a different business model kind of question. Sort of what would it take to enable that for quantum dots? Yes. Right. Yes. Well, I'm happy to be here as an attendee also. Looking forward to learning something. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, perovskites are very interesting. So the question was, do we see perovskites as a threat? I didn't put them on the slide there. I still see it as pretty nascent application. A big challenge for perovskites is something that I've lived. Goes to my RoHS slide. They contain lead, and so many consumer brands are just not going to be willing to accept lead of any level of lead. And so it'll be interesting to see where that goes. They have really narrow full width f-max, so the green performance from a perovskite is really excellent. That's for sure. They don't really have a red solution, and the stability is something they're working on. So it's still like kind of a work in progress. But yeah, we'll see. All right.